Ibodi was a mystical coastal village cradled between the lush, green Nigerian landscape and the vast, endless ocean. The town's narrow, winding streets were lined with small, colorful homes adorned with symbols of protection, blessings, and tributes to the ancient gods. Palm trees swayed gently in the salty breeze, their rustling leaves echoing the whispers of the sea. The sun bathed the village in a golden light each morning, and at dusk, the sky would bleed into hues of pink and orange, a daily masterpiece reflected on the shimmering waters. To the villagers, the ocean was not just a body of water, it was a living entity with moods, whims, and rules. The sea's most sacred and feared guardian was Mami Wata, a goddess of immense beauty and power. She was the giver of life, the keeper of secrets, and the protector of the ocean's treasures. Stories of Mami Wata filled the village's folklore, passed down from generation to generation. She was said to be half woman, half fish, with hair that flowed like water and eyes that could see into your soul. It was believed that she granted wealth and beauty to those she favored but would bring ruin to those who disrespected the sea. The villagers lived in a delicate balance with the ocean spirit, always careful to appease her. Fishermen would cast their nets only after praying for Mami Wata's blessing, and young women would offer flowers and mirrors at the water's edge, hoping to catch a glimpse of her elusive form. It was in this world, steeped in tradition and myth, that Adana was born. Adana was different from the start. She was beautiful but in a way that was subtly unsettling, with a beauty that seemed otherworldly, not entirely human. Her long, dark hair shone like polished ebony, and her eyes were deep, piercing blue, an uncommon and unnatural color for the village. She moved with a fluid grace, her steps light as if she floated rather than walked. From a young age, she was drawn to the sea, spending hours at the shoreline, whispering to the waves as if they could hear her. The villagers often watched her, curious and wary, sensing there was something not quite right about the girl who seemed more at home in the water than on land. Adana's mother, Mami Wata, had chosen to raise her daughter among mortals, allowing her to experience life as a human. But Adana was no ordinary girl. She was a princess of the sea, a child born of the ocean's magic, destined to inherit powers beyond mortal comprehension. Her connection to water was profound, a bond that went beyond the physical. She could hear the ocean's voice, feel its emotions, and sometimes, when no one was watching, she could even command it. Small waves would ripple at her feet when she was happy, and the tide would swell when she was angry. But Adana's divine heritage was a secret she was forced to keep. Her mother had warned her of the dangers of revealing her true identity, cautioning that humans feared what they did not understand. In her dreams, Mami Wata's voice would whisper warnings and encouragement, guiding Adana through the trials she faced on land. Adana, Mami Wata's voice would echo softly, a mix of motherly warmth and godly authority, "You are of the sea. Never forget your true nature. The land is not your home." Adana would wake from these dreams conflicted, torn between her longing to embrace her heritage and her desire to fit in with the human world. She attended university in the city, far from her coastal village, hoping to blend in and live a normal life. But no matter how hard she tried, she could never fully suppress who she was. She would find herself drawn to any body of water, spending her free time at riversides or the city's beaches, where she felt the most at peace. Yet, her peculiar habits and quiet demeanor made her an easy target for ridicule. At university, Adana kept to herself, wearing simple clothes and speaking only when necessary. She wasn't interested in the flashy parties, the expensive clothes, or the constant need to be seen and heard that consumed so many of her peers. She was content with her solitude, but her strange aura and reclusive nature caught the attention of those who thrived on making others feel small. Rita, Tommy, and Chike were the unchallenged rulers of the university's social scene. Rita, with her striking beauty and ruthless ambition, was the self-appointed queen bee. Tommy, always by her side, mirrored Rita's every move, providing backup in their relentless campaign of social dominance. Chike, the handsome playboy, was the muscle of the group, his arrogance matched only by his need to impress his friends. The trio had everything: wealth, influence, and a seemingly endless desire to torment those they deemed unworthy. Adana, with her quiet nature and unusual habits, quickly became their favorite target. They mocked her for her village origins, her simple clothes, and her tendency to drift off into her own world. They found her love for water strange and her refusal to conform infuriating. To them, she was a puzzle they couldn't figure out and a threat to their carefully constructed social order. Adana's days at the university were filled with dread. Every time she stepped onto the campus, she felt the weight of the bullies' eyes on her. Rita's mocking laughter echoed in her ears, and Tommy's whispered insults followed her like a shadow. They would go out of their way to embarrass her, spilling drinks on her, pushing her into puddles, and laughing when she flinched. But the worst was Chike, whose physical intimidation was disguised as casual playfulness, an arm slung over her shoulder that lingered too long, a shove that was just hard enough to bruise. One day, in the middle of a lecture, Chike hurled a crumpled paper ball at Adana's head, causing the entire class to burst into laughter. Adana sat still, refusing to react, but inside she felt a surge of anger. The water in the glass on her desk began to ripple, unnoticed by anyone but her. She clenched her fist, willing herself to stay calm, but the anger was like a tide, rising and threatening to spill over. Rita smirked from across the room, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. "What's wrong, water witch? Afraid you melt?" she taunted, her words dripping with malice. Adana's chest tightened, and she fought the urge to unleash the power that simmered just beneath her skin. She could feel the ocean calling to her, urging her to strike back, but she resisted. She knew the consequences of revealing herself, and she was determined not to let the bullies dictate her actions. After class, Adana retreated to the campus fountain, her usual place of solace. She dipped her fingers into the water, feeling its cool touch soothe her frayed nerves. But her moment of peace was shattered when Rita, Tommy, and Chike appeared, their mocking smiles sending a chill down her spine. Without warning, Chike shoved her into the fountain, her body hitting the water with a splash. The cold enveloped her, but instead of feeling fear, Adana felt an overwhelming sense of power. The water seemed to wrap around her like a protective cloak, energizing her in a way that nothing on land ever could. For a moment, her skin glimmered, and her eyes flashed with an unearthly light. Tommy gasped, stepping back in alarm. "Did you see that?" she whispered, clutching Rita's arm. But Rita was too busy laughing to notice the brief flicker of magic. "Look at you," Rita sneered, pointing at Adana as she climbed out of the fountain. "You belong in the water, freak." Adana's hands trembled, her emotions swirling like a storm inside her. She wanted to let go, to unleash the full force of her powers and show these bullies exactly who they were dealing with. But she swallowed her anger, knowing that revealing herself now would only confirm their worst fears. As the weeks passed, the bullies' harassment escalated. They spread rumors about Adana, calling her a witch, a cursed child, a fish out of water. They pushed her into lockers, stole her books, and even sabotaged her school projects. Adana's inner struggle intensified as she tried to maintain control of her powers, but every slight, every insult, chipped away at her resolve. Mami Wata's voice became more insistent in her dreams, urging her to return to the sea before her powers were exposed. "Your enemies do not deserve mercy," Adana, her mother warned. "The land will never be your true home. Return to the ocean where you belong." But Adana wasn't ready to give up. She had made a choice to live among humans, to experience life beyond the sea, and she was determined to see it through, no matter how much it hurt. The bullies, sensing her vulnerability, devised one final plan to humiliate her at the university's upcoming cultural festival. It would be a grand spectacle of cruelty, and they were certain it would break Adana once and for all. The annual cultural festival was the highlight of the year, a night where the university transformed into a vibrant showcase of Nigeria's rich and diverse heritage. Everywhere Adana looked, she saw displays of pride, students dressed in elaborate traditional attires, food stalls brimming with jollof rice, suya, and pepper soup, and music that filled the air with rhythmic beats of talking drums and melodious songs. The festival was a celebration of identity, a night where everyone could feel seen and proud of their roots. But for Adana, the festival was bittersweet. She wandered through the crowd, taking in the sights and sounds but feeling disconnected, as if she were a spectator in someone else's world. She longed to belong, to feel the warmth of camaraderie that surrounded her, but the bullying had left her isolated and wary of others. She kept her distance, avoiding the gaze of students who whispered and pointed, still remembering the cruel pranks and harsh words that had followed her all semester. Adana wore a simple, flowing gown that shimmered like the ocean under moonlight. Beads of blue and green adorned her hair, mimicking the colors of the sea. She moved through the festival like a shadow, quietly admiring the beauty around her but always aware of the undercurrent of mockery and judgment that seemed to follow her. Tonight, more than ever, she felt the weight of her hidden identity. In the midst of the celebrations, Adana's thoughts drifted back to her mother, Mami Wata. She remembered the stories she had heard as a child, stories of the goddess's beauty, her power, and her fierce protection of those she loved. Adana longed for the comfort of the ocean, the familiar embrace of the waves, and the safety of a world where she was not seen as an outcast. But she had chosen to walk among humans, and tonight she was determined to stand her ground, no matter what the bullies had planned. As Adana tried to enjoy the festivities, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see Rita, Tommy, and Chike standing before her, each wearing insincere smiles that barely masked their true intentions. Rita, dressed in a dazzling red and gold gown, stepped forward with a sickly sweet tone. "Adana, you look nice," Rita said, her voice laced with hidden malice. "We've been talking, and we realized we've been unfair. We want to make it up to you." Adana eyed them warily, her instinct screaming that this was a trap. But beneath her suspicion was a flicker of hope, a desire to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had changed. She hesitated, her heart caught between the longing to be accepted and the fear of being hurt again. "Come with us," Rita urged, taking Adana's hand in a gesture that felt both forced and uncomfortable. "We've planned something special for you. A surprise." Adana followed them reluctantly, feeling the stares of the crowd as she was led toward the main stage. The festival's music faded into the background, replaced by the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Rita guided her onto the stage, positioning her in the center as Tommy and Chike flanked her sides. The stage lights blinded Adana momentarily, and she squinted, struggling to see the faces of the students who had gathered below, eager to witness whatever was about to unfold. Rita raised the microphone to her lips, her smile wide and gleaming under the lights. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice echoing across the festival grounds. "Tonight, we want to honor someone very special. Someone who's different." Adana's stomach tightened. She knew this wasn't a tribute, it was an ambush. But before she could react, buckets of icy, salty water were dumped over her head, drenching her from head to toe. The cold shock of it stole her breath, and she gasped as the water soaked through her gown, clinging to her skin. Laughter erupted from the crowd, mingling with the flashes of cameras and the murmur of mocking voices. "There you go, fish girl," Rita shouted gleefully. "Back where you belong, in the water." The world around Adana seemed to blur, her vision clouded by tears of humiliation and rage. The water dripped from her hair, and her gown clung heavily to her body. But instead of feeling defeated, Adana felt something shift inside her, a surge of power that had been suppressed for far too long. The water that was meant to shame her now pulsed with energy, wrapping around her like a protective cocoon. Her skin began to glow faintly, the iridescence spreading from her fingertips up to her arms, as if the sea itself was waking up within her. The laughter of the crowd faded, replaced by gasps of shock and disbelief as they watched Adana's transformation unfold before their eyes. Her hair, dark and heavy with water, began to shimmer like the ocean's surface at sunrise. Her eyes, usually soft and brown, now shone a deep, piercing blue that was both beautiful and terrifying. Rita's smile faltered as she realized something was terribly wrong. The crowd's jeers turned to murmurs of fear and awe, and even Tommy and Chike took a step back, their faces pale with disbelief. Adana's once simple gown now appeared to shift and ripple like waves, her entire being radiating an unearthly light that seemed to grow brighter with every passing second. As the transformation continued, Adana could feel the ocean's power coursing through her veins, stronger than it had ever been. It was as if the sea was reclaiming her, reminding her of who she truly was. The water around her began to ripple and rise, swirling in graceful arcs that defied gravity. The crowd fell silent, captivated by the sight of a girl who was no longer just Adana, but a living embodiment of the sea's magic. Rita stumbled backward, her eyes wide with terror. What are you?" she stammered, her voice cracking as fear replaced her arrogance. Adana stepped forward, her presence commanding and ethereal. She could see the fear in Rita's eyes, the dawning realization that she had made a grave mistake. The water that had humiliated Adana now circled her protectively, responding to her emotions like a loyal servant. The crowd watched in stunned silence, unsure whether to run or bow in reverence. "I am not what you think I am," Adana said, her voice echoing with a power that seemed to come from the depths of the ocean itself. "I am the daughter of the sea, and you have pushed me too far." Rita, Tommy, and Chike were paralyzed, their bodies trembling as they faced the supernatural force before them. They had seen Adana as weak, an easy target for their cruelty, but now they were confronted with the truth: Adana was not just a quiet, strange girl. She was a mermaid princess, the daughter of Mami Wata, and she was done hiding. The water around Adana rose higher, forming a barrier that separated her from the bullies. It moved with a life of its own, shimmering and swirling like a living creature, ready to strike at her command. For the first time, Rita, Tommy, and Chike were truly afraid, their bravado stripped away in the face of Adana's unbridled power. Rita dropped to her knees, her earlier confidence shattered. "Please, Adana," she pleaded, her voice shaking. We didn't know who you were. We are sorry." Adana looked down at them, her expression a mix of anger and sorrow. She could see the fear in their eyes, the regret that now consumed them, but she was not ready to forgive. They had tormented her, humiliated her, and pushed her to her breaking point. And now, they were at her mercy. The water tightened around the bullies, rising just high enough to encircle their bodies, and they gasped as it pressed against their skin. Adana could feel Mami Wata's presence beside her, a silent but powerful force urging her to decide their fate. The crowd watched, holding their breath, as Adana faced her tormentors with a quiet, unyielding strength. "You thought you could break me," Adana said, her voice low and steady. "But you have only awakened what was already inside me. The ocean does not forget, and neither do I." The tension in the air was electric, and the crowd was frozen, unable to look away from the spectacle unfolding before them. Adana stood at the center of the stage, surrounded by a swirling vortex of water that moved at her command. Her hair flowed like dark waves, her skin shimmered with an iridescent glow, and her eyes burned with an intensity that left no doubt this was no ordinary girl. She was a goddess among mortals, and her presence was both mesmerizing and terrifying. Rita, Tommy, and Chike were trapped within the watery barrier, their fear palpable. They had mocked and tormented Adana, never imagining that she was capable of such power. Now, faced with the full force of her true self, they were reduced to trembling, desperate figures, pleading for mercy they weren't sure they deserved. Adana's transformation was complete, and she stood before the crowd as a living embodiment of the sea's might. Her connection to her mother, Mami Wata, was stronger than ever, and she could feel the goddess's power flowing through her. For the first time in her life, Adana felt truly seen, not as an outcast, but as the powerful being she was born to be. But as she looked at the bullies, Adana's anger wavered, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. She had spent so long hiding, so long suppressing her true self out of fear of rejection and ridicule. She had wanted so badly to belong, to be accepted, but the world had shown her only cruelty. Now, as she stood before those who had hurt her, Adana realized that their fear was not of her, but of the unknown, of a power they could not control or understand. The water around Rita, Tommy, and Chike began to pulse, tightening its grip as if preparing to swallow them whole. Adana watched them, her heart heavy with the weight of her power. She could feel Mami Wata's presence urging her to act, to teach these bullies a lesson they would never forget. The water responded to her emotions, swelling and rising, ready to exact the justice they so richly deserved. But as the bullies cowered before her, Adana saw something she hadn't expected: true remorse. Rita's tears were not just from fear, they were from shame. Tommy clung to Rita, her eyes filled with guilt, and Chike, usually so proud and arrogant, was now humbled, his head bowed in submission. They were no longer the untouchable elites who had tormented her, they were scared, vulnerable, and painfully human. A memory flashed through Adana's mind, one of the nights she had spent alone by the ocean, crying quietly as the waves lapped at her feet. She remembered feeling powerless, lost, and disconnected from the world around her. And now, looking at the bullies, she realized that their cruelty had been born from their own insecurities and fears. They had lashed out at her because they didn't understand her, just as she had once struggled to understand herself. Adana took a deep breath, her decision made. The water around the bullies began to recede, lowering them gently back to the ground. They collapsed, drenched and shivering, but alive. Adana had chosen mercy, not because they deserved it, but because she refused to let their hatred define her. She would not be like them. "Go," Adana said, her voice firm but filled with compassion. "Learn from this, and change your ways. The sea has spared you, but it will not forget. If you ever harm another as you have harmed me, it will be there to remind you." The bullies nodded, their faces pale and streaked with tears. They had been humbled in the most public of ways, and they knew that they would never be the same. As they stumbled away, the crowd watched in awe, still reeling from the revelation of Adana's true nature. Adana turned to face the crowd, her glowing form slowly fading as she reigned in her powers. She could feel the eyes of the students on her, some filled with fear, others with newfound respect. But Adana no longer cared about their judgment. She was done hiding, done pretending to be something she was not. She was Adana, the daughter of Mami Wata, and she would never be ashamed of who she was again. With a final glance at the sea of faces before her, Adana stepped down from the stage, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She had faced her bullies, revealed her true self, and emerged stronger. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, Adana knew that she was ready to face whatever came next. She was no longer just a quiet, strange girl. She was a force of nature, and she was finally free. In the days that followed, the story of the festival spread like wildfire. Everyone on campus was talking about the girl who had revealed herself as the daughter of Mami Wata, the mermaid princess who had tamed the sea. Some students were afraid, keeping their distance from Adana out of respect and fear. Others were drawn to her, intrigued by her otherworldly aura and the quiet strength that had always set her apart. Adana, for the first time in her life, felt truly seen. She no longer needed to hide or pretend. She embraced her identity fully, walking the campus with a newfound confidence. She was still Adana, the quiet girl who loved the sea, but she was also a force to be reckoned with, and everyone knew it. The bullies, once the most powerful figures on campus, were now shadows of their former selves. Rita, Tommy, and Chike avoided Adana, their arrogance stripped away by the encounter. They tried to make amends, offering apologies and small acts of kindness, but Adana kept her distance. She had forgiven them, but she would never forget the pain they had caused. Adana's connection to the sea grew stronger, and she would often return to the ocean's edge, where she felt closest to her mother. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she stood on the shore, feeling the cool waves lap at her feet. Mami Wata's presence was strong, her voice clear and soothing. "You did well, my daughter," Mami Wata said, her voice filled with pride. "You have shown strength, compassion, and wisdom. But remember, your journey is far from over. There are still many who do not understand the power of the sea." Adana nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She knew that she had a responsibility, not just as Mami Wata's daughter, but as a bridge between the human world and the ocean's depths.